There are three red wines well known in Piedmont, Italy. This week we're having the second of those three this year, and it's a dry one whose name ironically means little sweet one. And in this week's tip of the week, because wine temperatures are such a pet peeve of mine, I'm having to break this up, and we're starting a three-part series on it. All that coming up next. Hello, welcome to Wine This Week with Scott Leek. This week we're focusing on the northern Italian region of Piedmont again, and the wine is Dolcetto. Dolcetto is the grape, so thanks Italy for having no consistency, and in this case, the name of the grape actually does appear on the bottle, unlike Chianti, for example. So Dolcetto d'Alba, Dolcetta from the region of Alba in Piedmont is what we're having today. And Dolcetto, as I mentioned, the name means little sweet one in Italian. We're not exactly sure how it got that name because it is a dry wine. Maybe it was sweet at one point in time. The grape itself is actually fairly sweet when you eat it right at harvest, and that's not necessarily common among wine grapes. The other reason could be is that this is a wine that has fairly low acidity, and that's not terribly common, particularly among red wines in Italy. So the fact that this has a lot of fruit-forward flavors and low acidity can give the perceived sense of sweetness when there really isn't any sweetness there. So we'll find out today if that's the case, and I'm looking forward to giving this a try. I enjoyed the Barbera that we had in week 3, and there are going to be some similarities between the two, but this might have some darker fruits, whereas Barbera is more of the cherry. Barbera is actually high acidity and maybe lower tannin than this. So they both do have in common, though, is that they're second fiddle to Nebbiolo and Piedmont. It is a really drinkable wine, and in fact, it wasn't really considered to be a very good wine for the longest time. It was referred to as being gulpable in northern Italy. It was on the tables at lunchtime, and it was made kind of in mass quantities, and it got the leftover spots where the Nebbiolo grape wasn't planted. So this one in particular, although this family makes a Barolo out of Nebbiolo and gives it the best plots, this grows on western facing slopes. Not as much good sun exposure and ripeness for fruit as a south facing slope would be. But it should still be a pretty good wine. They don't really export much Dolcetto into the US, and what does come here tends to be pretty good. So I'm excited to give this a try. So for those of you who are paying attention at all, there's now 2 bottles here. Why is that? Because the first one sucked so bad, I had to open another one. This is a 2016, this is a 2019. Dolcetto should be consumed young. I was kind of pushing it opening a 2016. This was very muted. I couldn't discern much on the nose. I couldn't discern much on the palate. I did film a little bit and then I just gave up. Maybe I'll figure out a way to edit this where I throw in a clip of it. It's a little muted. There's like nothing there. There's not much going on with that wine. Actually, I opened this because I thought there's no way this is what Dolcetto has to offer. I watched other videos, I've read up on it. It shouldn't be what I thought it was from my tasting. So I'm thinking the acidity was much higher than I thought it was going to be. This should be a low acid wine. This was actually medium high. Couldn't pick out any fruit flavors at all. There was fruit there. It just smelled and tasted like red wine. And that's all I could get. So it just felt like maybe this was a bit oxidized. And so I opened a second one hoping to get a better experience. I didn't. I normally try to give you guys my initial gut reaction, and you get to see that live when I open it and taste it for the first time, but I just thought because of how badly it went with the first one, I needed to do that with the second one ahead of time. I don't know that first one was oxidized. Maybe it's a little tired because it's 5 years old and you shouldn't drink a Dolcetto at 5 years old. This is a 2019. But let me walk you through it real quick. So first of all, this is pretty light in color. This was darker. This Dolcetto, from what I've read, is more of a purple colored. It's a darker wine, and it's going to have some darker fruits and low acid and medium tannins. This is, I'm going to call it medium intensity ruby at best. I can practically read the words on this paper behind it. The first one a little bit more opaque, but not completely dark. There's a little bit on the nose there, and it's not bad. This is not unpleasant. There's some violet, maybe a little bit of strawberry, cherry, and if I'm really reaching, some licorice. Palate definitely has no business being called Little Sweet One. This is a dry wine. I do kind of get that hint of perceived sweetness because the acid is fairly low. I'm going to call it medium low. It's not that there's no acidity. That's definitely not the case. But it's less acidic than most wines. Tannin level is right around medium. I got a nice little drying sensation everywhere, but very smooth, soft tannins. So that's nice. Alcohol level, this is a 13.5. I didn't really get much heat. I didn't really get much finish either. And I'm not really surprised because there's not much to begin with. So can't really expect a long finish when you don't get anything really pronounced when you're tasting it either. So yeah, this is underwhelming would be the best adjective I can think of to describe this wine. Again, it's not bad. It's just, there's not much there. This is the wine, I've got a term that we use in my family called the placebo wine. This is a perfect placebo wine. This cost $15. This one was $20, and I have no idea why. But for $15, this is a wine you can put on a table, and anyone who likes red wine and doesn't care what it is will drink this and be happy. There's nothing wrong with it. So for the Thanksgiving dinner and you just need to put something on the table that anyone's going to look at the label and go, oh, Dolcetto de Alba. Yeah, it looks fancy. Ooh la la. That's French, but you get my point. That could be a good wine for the people who just don't care what red wine they're drinking as long as they're drinking red wine. And then you can hoard the good stuff for yourself over on your corner of the table. I don't know why else you would drink this wine. Hopefully there's better Dolcettos out there, but neither one of these are it. There's a little credit I got to give it for balance. Nothing much for the length, nothing much for the intensity, nothing much for the complexity. I'm giving this 4 points on a 10-point scale. There's just not much to be excited about here. As far as pairings go, pair it with your mother-in-law. I don't know. I have no idea. I'm so confounded by this. This is the least exciting wine I've had all year. And I can see why this gets the worst slopes in Piedmont. Before I go any further, if you like your red wine served at 72 degrees and you like your white wine served at 35 degrees, I'm not going to tell you you're a weirdo. Not to your face. I'll say it behind your back, but not to your face. Most people in the US drink their red wine too warm and their white wine too cold. There is a nice sweet spot, and there's even sweet spots depending on light red or full-bodied white that might be closer. I'm going to get into that a little bit more in the next 2 weeks, but for right now, I want you to understand kind of the science behind this and why this makes sense and why having the wine at the right temperature makes a difference and is going to enhance your experience. So first off, little 6th grade science here. Whether it's wine or your body or whatever, temperature is, at its basic, it is the average kinetic energy of an object. And as that temperature rises, those particles are moving faster and faster. So in a glass of wine, the more you warm it up, the faster those particles move, the more the aromas are going to dissipate. Meanwhile, if it's too cold, the particles are moving nice and slowly. The aromas are going to be muted because they're not coming out of the glass very quickly. So keep in mind that as much as you love your white wine really cold, you're actually muting the flavors and the aromas if you have it too cold. And with the red wine, they might be moving too fast, they're dissipating too quickly, and you're getting too much of the heat of the alcohol. So think about a glass of bourbon neat and one on the rocks. And if you put your nose in the one that's neat, you're going to get that proof, that heat from the alcohol pretty intensely in your nose. If you go and you smell the one that's got the ice in, it's a little more chilled. It's maybe a little bit more nuanced and more muted. Not to say that it's bad one way or another. Some people like it, but the science behind it is the same. And here's an even more basic example for you too. Think about Thanksgiving. We talked about it a moment ago. When that turkey's in the oven and it's about ready, how amazing does that kitchen smell? Well, how did that turkey smell when it was sitting on the counter at room temperature versus at 350 degrees? And furthermore, what did that turkey smell like when it came out of the freezer? Well, it didn't really smell like anything. The warmer it got, the more flavors that came out of it, the more aromas. But you all know you can overdo a turkey and too hot or cook too long, and you have released a lot of its flavors and they're gone forever. So that's the thing to be careful about when having your wines too warm. More kinetic energy, more particles moving, the aromas are going to dissipate. Next week, we'll focus on what do you do when you're at a restaurant and someone serves you wine and it's too warm. Thank you for watching another episode of Wine This Week. I hope this was, let's call it entertaining for you. Join me next week as we move on to the region of Beaujolais and the varietal Gamay. Until then, keep trying new wines, and as always, cheers.